Hey y'all, it's Stephen Van Kampen-Lewis, and today I'm going to show you how I'm potting up my imported from Brazil rupiculous Cattleyas and Cattleya nobilior variety Amalii. The Amaliis, as I said in my last video, I got to pick out, I got to hand pick when I was in Brazil with one of Francisco Miranda's vendors, and then when I saw Francisco's list, I knew that I wanted to get some of these rupiculous Cattleyas because they're just, I got to see them in the habitat, and it's a really cool group that will fit nicely into my extremely bright orchid cabinet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the two techniques I'm going to use for my Cattleya nobiliors, and I say techniques, basically I'm going to do one with large grade orchiata bark, which is how I normally pot up my nobiliors, and then another one I'm going to try is this rice husk, this carbonized rice husk. And I saw all of these Cattleyas in Brazil being potted in this media. I think down there it's really cheap and easy to get. Up here in the United States it's kind of expensive. So I don't know, I'm going to give it a shot with one of the three nobiliors. And then for the rupiculous Cattleyas, Laelias, Hoffmannseggella, whatever you want to say, I'm going to pot those in, they're terrestrials, but they live on rocks with this much sand on top. So I'm going to replicate that. I'm also going to show you some of my successful versions of these potting methods that I've done for years, to show you kind of my goal, and then I'll talk a little bit about some techniques for successful Cattleya importing, and like how to get them acclimated to the northern hemisphere. Of course, since it's the southern hemisphere, right now it's getting towards the end of October, which to the Brazilian Cattleyas, they think it's spring, and so converting them into fall, and then basically acclimating them to the northern hemisphere takes some time. So when you're importing Cattleyas, they're a lot easier to acclimate to the northern hemisphere than, say, Catasetums, which are extremely sort of seasonal in their growth patterns, and they're really deciduous. The Catasetums, of course, drop their leaves, so it takes a while to get them onto the cycle. But the Cattleyas are less finicky. They're less prone, in my experience, they're less prone to just up and dying from any little inconsistency that they deem inconsistent, I guess. So some of the tricks that I do is I throw them in the mix with the rest of the Cattleyas. I don't really give them a whole lot of special treatment. So this time of year, what I'll make sure to do is, since these plants think it's spring, but I'm going into fall, I need to expose them to the correct day length. So don't just put them under 12-hour or 14-hour or whatever days. You need that seasonal variation. This is just true for basically all your orchids. You really should have them on a separate timer if they're under lights, so they're getting that seasonal cues. Those seasonal cues are really important for a lot of plants, for blooming, for growing. I use these Casa plugs, which I can program from my phone. They're like $20 for two of them, so they're super cheap. And there's a setting that it just matches. It figures out what your local sunrise and sunset times are, and then you can just hit a button, and your timers turn on when the sun comes up in the morning, and they turn off in the evening, and they automatically adjust to your seasonal changes. So every little day, of course, throughout the year, the sun is changing how long it's in the sky, and it matches that. So you get an automatic seasonal cue there, and it's, like I said, super cheap, super easy. So that's really important. The other thing is, I stop fertilizing my plants in winter, all of them, Cattleyas, Catasetums, everything. But for this group, as you saw in the video, I have those little fertilizer baskets, which will provide fertilizer and food for the plants during the winter. So as I'm hitting that as I'm hitting these plants with just water and not fertilizer water, they're still getting that fertilizer. They're still able to grow and feed. So that's really important. So give them the water and the fertilizer and the light that they need to grow over the winter. Another thing is don't try and force dormancy. That doesn't really work for Cattleyas. It doesn't work for any plants really, other than the extremely deciduous ones. So I would recommend just treating them normally, putting them in the mix with the other plants, and they really should acclimate on their own, especially the younger plants. Younger plants, like younger people, seem to adapt quicker and are easier to sort of acclimate to the northern hemisphere. And you'll probably have, your growth cycle will probably, within a year, it should be normal. Your flowering cycle might be a year or two off, as the seasonal cues and the internal hormones in the plants take a little longer to sync up. But basically by this time next year, my nobiliors and the rupiculous Cattleyas should be seasonally adjusted. They should be growing on a normal growth cycle, and hopefully I'll be getting blooms this time next year. We'll see though. It's possible, but these plants really need to grow their roots and in order to bloom well, and that root growth can take a little extra time. It can take a little while. So some plants, some orchids, some Cattleyas even, will just start blooming fairly quickly after their first flush of growth has put out those new roots. The more seasonal ones and the more sort of xeric ones, I guess, for lack of a better term, those species that grow in the areas with really harsh winters, like the rupiculous Cattleyas, like the Cattleya nobilior variety of Malii, they seem to be more inclined to put out a really big root system first, which can take a couple of years, and then they'll put out blooms. So, that's something to keep in mind. So seasonal cues, important from day length. Keep it warm, keep it bright, keep fertilizing all winter long. And then your plants should adapt to the northern hemisphere, like I said, in about a year. All right, so the first step to getting these acclimated to the northern hemisphere, and actually you don't really have to do this, but this is what I like to do, is get some of your Kelpak or your other sort of root hormone stimulator. Get your regular fertilizer. As you can see, this is where I get my, both of these actually come from First Rays. I really think he has the best stuff on the market, and I really like supporting him. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bowl of just plain old water. I'm going to mix a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then I'm going to let these soak for, 2 or 3 hours. And that'll be the first step to getting these acclimated and sort of giving them a jump start to life in the northern hemisphere. So, I've mentioned in my other videos recently that I don't really measure things, and that's true. So I just added a little tiny bit of Kelpak. A little of this goes a long way. So that's why I just added a little splash, and a little of this goes a really long way. So for those of you who know about mixing fertilizers, this is really strong stuff. For those of you who don't know about mixing fertilizers, this is really strong stuff. So I don't really need much. I just want to get, that's probably even too much. Whatever. That's close enough. So I'm throwing that in there. That will dissolve. I'll mix it a little bit so it helps the dissolution process. And then I'm going to put each one of these in here to soak up this really good water. And what's going to happen is this little bath is going to get two things to the roots, and of course, which gets to the plants. Putting the scissors in just to hold it there. But basically, just water-soluble fertilizer, the chemical stuff, the synthetic stuff, goes instantly to the roots. So organic stuff is great. That's what I use in my food gardens, and to a certain extent that's what I use in my catasetums. But for my orchids, the chemical stuff is instantly usable by the roots, whereas the organic stuff has to be broken down by bacteria and fungi. So that takes a long time. So if you want to get a real quick shot of nutrients in your plants, you have to use the synthetic chemicals. Additionally, this kelp pack is full of hormones which trigger additional rooting. So the additional rooting, of course, is especially powerful on plants like these that are already initiating their own roots. So what's going to happen is they're going to get more of those hormones. So they're naturally producing the hormones to produce the roots this time of year, because of course Brazilian plants think it's spring even though it's actually fall. But they're naturally producing their own hormones to generate those new roots. So a little extra shot of this will, at least in theory and in practice, I've found that this is true. The little extra shot of seaweed concentrate with the auxins and the other good stuff in there will help trigger additional roots. So I'm going to get a big flush of first roots, or I'm going to get a big flush of roots on my first batch here in the Northern Hemisphere. So again, this is the first step. I'll let this soak for 2 or 3 hours. Then I'll pull it out, I'll dump it out, and I'll let it drain and stay dry for the night. And then tomorrow, I will pot these up and show you how I do it. All right, so we have all of the materials here that I need. I've got, of course, the plants themselves. I have some large grade orchiata bark, the pots that they're going to go in. I have this rice husk that I mentioned earlier. So this is what it looks like. It's really just sort of fine carbon. And then I'll mix it with some perlite here. And we'll see how that does for one of these plants. And then I have the fertilizer. I'm going to get these into the basket and then show you how to make, sort of solidify it. And then of course my zip ties to tie it all down. But before I do that, I want to show you what a successful potting job for Cattleya nobilior looks like. So they are ramblers. They have a lot of space between each growth quite often, and they really like this large grade orchiata bark, and they want to dry off fast. So that's why I pot them in clay pots. I don't fill the pots up, of course, as you can see. Maybe this is about halfway full, and you can see just the tons and tons of roots that they put out. And actually you can see that they even put out a lot of roots in the wild also. So they are really, I mean, roots are important for all plants and all orchids and all Cattleyas, but they are especially important for the nobiliors in order for them to bloom well. So this is the ultimate goal of any nobilior plant that you have, is to have it in a big pot, mature size, putting out tons and tons of roots every year. So let's get started with these nobiliors. So as I showed in the last video, I have 3 plants here right now. I'm going to have, these 2 are the ones that I hand selected, and they're siblings actually. And then this one was the gift from the vendor. And I'm going to experiment with this one and put it into the rice hull mix. And what I'm going to do for that, actually, is I had about 2/3 rice hull to 1/3 perlite. And then I'm going to mix it together like this. And kind of eyeball it. So that looks good to me. And this is the type of mix that doesn't hold a lot of moisture necessarily and will dry fairly quickly. And then of course the perlite assists with that. So that'll let me water these guys all summer long during the heat of course, 2025. I like to hit them with water every single day. And so this is the pot that they're going to go into. Of course, I need to pull the sticker off the bottom so that the drainage works. And then what I like to do is take one of these little epi-webs and kind of jam it in the hole in the bottom, just so that these small pieces of rice husk aren't going to fly out the bottom every time I water. So what I'm going to do now is kind of position it in the pot where I want it to be. I actually want it closer to the back, like this. And now that I think about it, I don't know that that little piece of epi-web is going to do much, because I think I'm going to try and jam one of these up through here, and then get another one attached to it like this. And this zip tie will hold the plant in place. Of course, I need 2 hands to do this, and it can be kind of tricky. Alright, so I have this mostly in the position that I want. I'm going to add the media so that it actually pushes this plant out a little bit more. And then I have to secure the epi-web to the bottom so that the hole, like I said, that the rice doesn't just start pouring out the bottom of the hole after it's filled up. Alright, so this works. Now it's time to add the rice hulls. Make sure that I've got the plant positioned the way I want it. Of course, I want the new growth growing towards the middle. So you can see the plant is still wobbly. So I'll still get a stake in here. But what I'm going to do is get a little more rice, a little more perlite, and fill this up a little bit more, and then get a stake in there to even better hold this in place. Alright, so there's a couple different ways you can secure this type of thing. You can use a stake, cut it, and then zip tie to the plant. Instead, I'm going to use this pot clip. I had a long one, and I snipped it with one of these. And so what I can do now is clip it like this, and this is totally secure. So the next thing that I'll do is I will make a little fertilizer basket for this one, and then I'll write the tag. So when making these, I have my basket of Jim's Purely Organic. I jam it into this little cup here. I push it really hard, and then I dip it in water so that the outside solidifies into sort of a little cake. And to help you see the water a little better, I've left that carbonized rice dust in there. And then I'll dip it, get nice and wet. And you'll see the top is still dry. So I'll just add some drops there, and you can see it's really hydrophobic. But eventually that water will seep down. Unfortunately, these baskets are cheap and they don't close, but they still hold the fertilizer, and so I'll just push it into there. Then I make a plant tag. I'm not very good at writing these things in the air, so C. nobilior amalii. and then I will put the cross on the bottom indicating what the parents were so that I know the line breeding. And that's it. That's how I potted this one up. So now I'm going to put this one to the side and pot these up in my more traditional manner using bark. Alright, so here we are with the bark. I'm going to start with the smaller one and see how it looks inside this pot. I like that. And then same with the other one. It'll go into the same size pot as well. Once again, I want to hold the plant to the side of the pot using zip ties. I want to pull the stickers off. Position the plant in the back of the pot. Cinch it down decently hard, and you can see where the plant is in the pot. You can see there's the new roots coming out of this flower growth. I'm going to push this down a little bit. This one I'm not so worried about the large grade orchiata bark getting out the bottom of the pot, so I'm actually not even going to put in the epiweb to this one. Now I just backfill. Make sure that every last little piece tamp it down a bit. Make sure the leaves are not holding back any media, which these ones were, so I've got a big space in there to fill around some roots. Kind of push it down into some of these spaces while being gentle around where I know the new roots are growing. So this is not moving, this is not jiggling, this is exactly what I want. I have my tag, which is more legible than the last one, C. nobilior Amalii, and then I'll write the parent names here, put it in here. The last step to do is to create another fertilizer basket. Here. Get it full to the top. Squeeze it. Dunk it. Get a few drops on top. Like I said, those will eventually go in, even though it's just a water bubble on top. And that's it. I'll go put it next to my other ones. Alright, so it's been about a week since I got this, and the sun is already set, so I gotta go quick. But this is looking really good, actually. So I soaked this 2 or 3 times in the same kelp max and fertilizer bath that I did for the younger plants. Whereas the younger plants I only did it once. For this one I did it twice. Here's some paper still stuck to the leaf. And then additionally I left it out. You know, we finally got a period of rain, so I left it out in the rain getting natural sun and rain falling from the sky, and I think it's been helpful. I had pointed out some new roots last time I looked at this, like I said, about a week ago. There's a new root there, there's a new one there, there's a new one there, and then this new growth, which I'm not sure if it's a spike or a new bulb, is growing right here, has emerged a little more, and then you can see those roots there. So what I want to do is get this potted up in here and back in its spot over there under the shade house, and then call it a day for my Cattleya imports. I've got a bucket full of bark chips, and that's all I'm going to use. I did add one of these epiweb things to the hole here to prevent to prevent bark from going through. And you can see this is a used pot. It's been sterilized though, so it looks dirty, but it's not too bad. And so what I'll do is pour some in, remove this pot clip, which these are supremely handy. So if you ever get them, or if you ever see them for sale, definitely buy some. And so I'm tucking the roots in here, and then I'm getting the plant positioned in the pot. You know, you really want to have the smallest pot possible that fits your plant. And that is this pot. And so the newest growth is up here, which is closer to the edge than I'd prefer, but what I can do is that as it's growing, I can have the sun on this side and then train the new growth to kind of spin or move around the side of the pot that I want. So I'll get 2 or 3 years out of this, and then I'll just take this whole pot and drop it into a bigger one when the plant starts to really walk out of the pot. And so I want to make sure that the rhizome is not particularly exposed. Excuse me, is not particularly sunken. Start again. And so I want to make sure that the rhizome here is not particularly buried. If there's a few bark chips on top of it, that's fine. But I just want to make sure that it's not, you know, it's not buried under a whole bunch of bark, because that can trap moisture, and then these guys really won't like it. But this looks fine. So the plant is actually quite a bit more stable than I would have imagined without a clip. So I'm going to take the clip and really cinch it down here. And actually what I want to do is get another pot clip in here on this side, similarly pressing down on the plant so this thing is super ultra sturdy. This thing is just not moving, you know. And that's it. So that's my repotting for this larger plant. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back under the shade cloth. It's November 5th today, which is a Tuesday. And then we have a lot of rain coming in on Thursday night, so in 2 nights from now. So I'm just going to let this stay dry for the next day and a half, basically. And then let the water of the rain come in and flush it through. Otherwise, you know, I could hose it off in a day or two and then just start treating it, you know, as normal, watering and fertilizing as needed. This is actually a little more wobbly than I'd like. So I think I'll actually get another pot clip going across right here. but coming in from the other side. And that's it. Alright, so here we have the rupiculous Cattleyas that I got from Francisco this go around. And then just like with the nobiliors, where I have existing plants that I've been growing and I have some ideas of what I want to do with these ones, I'm going to show you those. I'm going to show you a success and a failure. And then I have, of course, my materials that I need. Clay pots with some epiweb, and then sand, just play sand with a little bit, about 25 or probably even less than 25% peat moss. And that's what the dark flecks in there are. So some of the larger chunks of peat. So before we do the repotting, I want to show you the success. So this is Laelia or Cattleya or Hoffmannseggella Insfeldii. And you can see that this one looks good. So the leaf color is great. It's got that nice red tinge. The new growths are a little shorter, maybe, which means they're getting adequate light. I got plenty of roots. So this I got as a bare root division from my friend Susan at an Orchid Society sale that we had in spring. I can't remember when. Maybe it was like April or May. And this one has done great. This was a bare root division, and it's just taken off. So this was about 50-50 peat and sand. I think that's more peat than I want. So, but anyway, this new mix will have less peat than here. But this is doing well. This is a failure. This is a Milleri that I got from Francisco maybe 2 years ago, and it just looks terrible. I repotted it, so that's why the sand doesn't look great. I think there's two variables that I think I didn't do well, and one was that I think I had too much peat in this mix, and then I didn't give it a really hard, dry rest like I saw in the wild. So that's two variables, right? But I was able to get this through most of a growing season with great success. So I think that it's not necessarily the peat mix that was the problem for this one. And I think I can remove the peat as an issue because it did just fine during the growing season. You know, I think what I did wrong was that I didn't give this one a dry rest. And I guess I should define what a failure is. So a failure probably for most folks is a dead plant, but this one just looks like crap. So this is not a failure quite yet, but if you compare this one with a healthy one, you can see that it's not doing well. And then if I were to pull this out, the roots wouldn't be good, whereas the roots in this one are great, and they spiral around the pot. And I'll show you that here in a sec. So this one is not really a failure. It's an almost failure. It's failing, maybe is a better way to say it. So I repotted it. I've got it in new sand that's pretty much almost only sand, and I'll give it a drier rest than last year, since the root system is so small and the new growths haven't really done anything for a year, I think. You know, I don't know that it really has the reserves to make it through a brutally dry winter rest, which is why I grabbed a backup one. So now I have my lessons learned, and I will treat them appropriately. All right, so that said, now I want to get these into here. And first I want to remove the sphagnum. So now these look great. These I don't think really need a whole lot of acclimation the way the nobiliors did. I don't think they need a shot of fertilizer water with a shot of Kelpak, because I think these are just they're doing great. They're putting out new growths. They're putting out new roots. The new roots, the old roots look really good. They're just packed in sphagnum, and that's not how they grow in the wild. And That probably worked pretty well for whichever Brazilian grower was working with these, but I want to get these in sphagnum. So I'm going to slowly tease this apart and pull the sphagnum off. All right, so this is Bradii. This is the one that turns bright red in the wild, as you can see here. So this one is getting less light than the wild ones, but that's normal for plants in cultivation. And this one looks pretty healthy. So I see a lot of good roots here. I see some older roots, like these stringy things. I'll just pull off. There we go. And I see a new root coming out right there. So this one is actively putting out new roots, this particular growth here. Hopefully I will get new roots from this one. I think that's the only new growth right now. So this one will put out new roots soon. So one of the things that you'll notice between these plants and the Cattleya nobiliors is that I'm not going to zip tie these down. Now I still need to prevent the sand from coming out, so I'm putting this down here. I'm going to add a little bit of sand here, pull out the chunks, and then I'm going to add sand here with the front of this new growth as close to the middle as I can, and the old growths in the back here. I do want to pack this down a little bit to get the roots in a little bit of a firmer position. And by that I mean less wiggly. And then I'll backfill with a little extra sand. And that's it. So since these will never be outside, I don't have to worry about the wind pushing them back and forth. And when I water, I'm not pouring with an overhand watering can. It's a pressure pumper that comes and sprays here. So the plant, I'm not worried about the plant wiggling, is basically what I'm saying. So I don't need to zip tie this down the same way that I do for the Cattleya nobiliors, which will spend a significant time, a portion of their lives outside. And they also get hit by a hose. So they need to be pretty secure. And that's how I repotted this one. So what I'm going to do is the exact same thing for these three, but I'm going to speed it up so you don't have to be bored. Alright, so these are done. So you can see I've got the sand just below the bulbs. Maybe a little bit of some of the rhizomes are covered, but not much. As these age and the sand settles down with a little bit of water, I think these will actually be exposed. The bottoms of the pseudobulbs will be exposed more than you see here. And I say that because that's exactly what happened here. So you can see the bottoms of the bulbs are exposed here. We see roots growing all over the place. And I potted these, this particular one, the same way that I potted those. So that's it. That's my repotting for these particular plants. I'm going to get them inside. The sun is almost down. It's getting really windy. We've finally got some storms coming our way. But that's it. So these will go inside my cabinet.